صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, for those of you who'd like to follow along, I'll be reciting from Surah Al-Hashr, Ayah 20, inshallah. Surah Hashr, Ayah 20. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا يستوي أصحاب النار وأصحاب الجنة. أصحاب الجنة هم الفائزون. لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله. وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر. سبحان الله. سبحان الله عما يشركون. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم. هو الله الذي لا إله إلا السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون. هو له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على رسول الله وآله الأطهار. One more time. اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على رسول الله وآله الأطهار. على رسول الله وآله الأطهار. صلوات.
Thank you so much, Hajj, for that beautiful recitation. If you can give another salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One more, ala hubbi Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Thank you so much, brothers and sisters, for coming to our last night of our program. Alhamdulillah, it was a very blessed month to have you all in the masjid, benefiting from, inshallah, benefiting from Sheikh and from Sheikh Nazzal. Inshallah, after the program today, we will be doing dua farewell of the month of Ramadan by Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. Brother Hassan Majaj, inshallah, will recite it. So it'll be after the lecture, after the Q&A. So if you can stick around, we'd love to have you here. Just for Eid announcements for that, Sunday, or tomorrow, inshallah, will be Eid for Sayyid Muhammad Fadlallah. Sayyid Sistani, it's most likely going to be on Monday. It's almost certainly going to be on Monday. And then for Sayyid Khamenei, it's still being, we're still waiting for the announcement. And inshallah, tomorrow we'll have the Eid prayers starting at 8. We'll have one at 8, 9, 10, 11. And then Monday, we will have one at 8, 9, and 10. So if you can make it, we'd love to have you. If not, try to make it to a different masjid and pray that amazing salah. And lastly, because I know a lot of people are asking the Sheikh this, so I thought I'd announce it. If you'd like to break your fast tomorrow, if you're not a frequent traveler, for Sayyid Sistani, Eid's Monday, so if you'd like to break your fast, you would have to travel to like Ann Arbor, let's say, after Salat Subh. Break your fast in Ann Arbor if you live in the Dearborn Heights area. Break your fast in Ann Arbor and then come back, and then you'll be able to celebrate Eid with the rest of the mu'mineen. So lastly, I would like to ask everybody if they can recite Fatiha al-Marhum Hajj Michael Hazimi, Ba'ad Salat al-Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And if you would like to break your fast again tomorrow, you would have to do it after Salat al-Subh. But if you wait until after Salat al-Duhr, then you can't. So between then, Salat al-Subh, Salat al-Duhr, you'll be able to go to Ann Arbor, let's say if you live in Dearborn Heights, break your fast and come back. Without further ado, I would like to invite our respected Sheikh Nazzal to the stage. Ba'ad Salat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. All the brothers can move a little bit forward, closer to the Sheikh. Last day, so one can have it a little more intimate. Thank you.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لي وليك الحجة ابن الحسن، صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة، وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا، برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, tonight's going to be our last night, and I don't know how I did it, but I'm still talking about taqwa. There are a few things that happened in the course of these nights that allowed me to structure my last lecture according to a problem that I see. So a few days ago, I had a sister who approached me, and she was very nervous, or she was confused, perplexed. And the idea is that you hear something on the minbar, someone says something on the minbar, and then you take it at face value because it's someone on the minbar. And then you go to some other scholar, for example, and you hear something that is a bit different. And then you kind of sort of realize, am I actually learning anything? Do I actually know anything? And there's this sort of confusion, but even sort of a fear that I might be taking false knowledge, or I might be accepting false knowledge. when we think of taqwa and that virtue of God wariness, to be among the muttaqoon, the God-fearing, it's not just in relation to our actions, our physical actions. It's not just in terms of doing righteous things, but it's also about sound beliefs. How many of us fear Allah Azza wa Jal with regards to our beliefs? How many people are or force themselves to evaluate their beliefs and to think critically and not to accept everything and only accept what Allah Azza wa Jal has sent down in His book. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. So how many of us feel that are losing sleep because of some of the things that we know, or some of the things that we think we might know or we likely know, but we're not sure? A fact that we heard on the minbar, but I'm seeking that true knowledge. Not because I want that knowledge to boast, not because I want to defeat an opponent in an argument, not because I want to know something for the sake of knowing it, just to merely know it, but because Allah Azza wa Jalla, I want to align my knowledge with reality. Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullah alayhi, he has a very beautiful definition of Islam. He says, Al-Islam huwa al-taslim, wa-al-taslim huwa al-yaqeen. Islam means submission, and submission means certainty, and certainty means belief. Belief means acknowledgement. Acknowledgement means discharge of duties, and discharge of duties means action. So Islam means certainty, it means belief, it means acknowledgement, it means discharge of duties, it means action. When I think of Islam, huwa taslim. Islam, if we're going to look at it, just the word Islam, it means submission, that total surrender and absolute submission before Allah Azza wa Jal. That means I do away with any complaining and objection. A Muslim, a true Muslim, is someone who does what? He doesn't complain when it comes to the will of Allah Azza wa Jal. He aligns himself perfectly with the will of Allah Azza wa Jal, in matters of the Sharia, but also in matters of belief. A lot of times when we approach belief, or we approach this idea, if this is the case, if we're after realities, if we're after truths, if Islam means a submission to what? A submission to truths. Let's look at the second statement of the Imam. The second statement of the Imam says Islam means certainty, meaning Islam means submission, submission means certainty. Where does that submission come from? Is it something that I just teach my kids, or I habituate myself to surrender to the Sharia? Is it something that I can force on myself? It's not something that you force on yourself. It's something that stems from certainty. It stems from knowledge. It stems from yaqeen. Then you have certainty. And when you have certainty, if we go to the last statement of the Imam, that means it's action. That means a Muslim is a man or a woman of action. So if that's the case, if we want to surrender to the truth as a Muslim, then what are the pitfalls of that? Why do we find a lot of people stray from that? If all we want is the truth, if every human being, even outside of the religion of Islam, even in other religions, even among irreligious people, there's no human being that's going to say, I don't want the truth. There's no human being that's going to say, I'm not going to examine my beliefs and say, let me think critically about my beliefs. Everyone wants it, at least in theory. Everyone wants it. And we want it. What are the pitfalls of searching for knowledge? Why is it that some people stray? Why is it that some people don't arrive at certainty? Why is it that some people arrive at certainty but they're actually deceived? They think they have knowledge. They think they have certainty. What I want to do today, in the framework of our lectures, or in the framework of this series, look at the concept of taqwa and And I titled my lecture today, The Wellspring of Reflection. That means taqwa, the wellspring of reflection. We want to reflect, we want to understand, we want to know. But what are those pitfalls? Inshallah, I'm going to go through 4 pitfalls. 4 things that we have to be careful about. And the first ayah that we have, if we look at one ayah that's going to sort of set the stage, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. Allah Azza wa Jal says, do not pursue that of which you have no knowledge. The one pitfall, or the first pitfall, is that we tend to go after what? We tend to make decisions, or we tend to have beliefs that are based completely on supposition. They're based on fallacies. They're based on conjecture. Allah Azza wa Jal warns us in the Quran time and time again not to go after supposition, not to base action and beliefs on supposition and conjecture. Look for something, look for certainty, look for yaqeen, look for knowledge. If I'm going to base my faith on anything, if I'm going to base my submission, my taslim on anything, it should be based on knowledge. And so when that sister came to me, I was actually delighted. I was actually happy. Because how many of us lose sleep because of the beliefs that we have? How many of us have actually examined our beliefs? How many of us fear Allah Azza wa Jal regarding our beliefs? If I heard something, I told her, if you hear something on the minbar, it's your right to ask, what is your source? And if that source doesn't figure in the Quran, and it doesn't figure in the words of the Imams, then let it go. A lot of times people find that there's this sort of confusion because they kind of feel lost. You're a human being, Allah Azza wa Jal gave you an intellect, use it. And so when we look at the first pitfall of searching for the truth, or why people seem to fall away from the path, or not find the truth, the very first one that our ulama talk about, and that the Quran mentions frequently, is the idea that we rely on supposition. And so the very first thing that we want to do, brothers and sisters, if we truly fear Allah Azza wa Jal, is not to approach Allah and not to approach our lives and not to approach our ibadah with supposition, or rely on supposition, or rely on conjecture, or what might likely be true. Now we're looking for an announcement, official announcement, when the Eid will be, or when it will fall on, whether it's going to fall on Sunday or Monday. And you find a lot of members in the community, they engage in this sort of ijtihad. They want to enter the debate, so to speak. They want to take part in the debate, and they feel like they have a view and an opinion that should be heard. And all I can say is, fear Allah Azza wa Jal. What are we doing? We're engaging, we don't even have the preliminary knowledge to engage in such a debate. Islam doesn't close, by the way, brothers and sisters, Islam doesn't close the door to reflection. It doesn't close the door to asking and questioning. It doesn't close it, but it says don't base that on supposition and conjecture. Base it on something that is true. Base it on knowledge. And so while at the same time I might say to that sister, ask the Sheikh, you deserve to ask the Sheikh, what is your source and where are you saying that? What is your argument? But at the same time, I know the boundaries and the limits of my knowledge. I don't enter into a debate when I have no knowledge. Tullab, students of knowledge who go to the Hawza, they spend maybe 10, 12 years, and they still feel, when they stand in front of a true scholar, they feel like they know nothing. Be careful of someone who claims knowledge who doesn't have it. So the very first thing, brothers and sisters, what we want to do on a practical level, if we're after the truth, if in the end of the day, every person is looking for that ma'rifah of Allah Azza wa Jal, and looking, what religion is true? Is it Christianity? Is it Judaism? Is it Islam? Or maybe in politics, for example, I might be looking for something, right? Who's right? Who's wrong? I'm looking for real perception. The very first thing that we have to do is make sure that none of our beliefs and none of our actions are based on supposition and conjecture. And that is the heart of the Quran. In college, I remember I was reading a lot of works written by atheists. And one of the claims that atheists make is that religion is based on faith. It's a leap of faith. Knowledge of Allah Azza wa Jal amounts to a knowledge or a gap of knowledge. And so whenever we have a gap of knowledge, we just insert Allah Azza wa Jal into that gap, and then that is belief and that is iman. But when we look at the Quran, it's completely different. When we look at the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it's completely different. Assimilate knowledge, seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave. Seek knowledge even if it's with a kafir. Seek knowledge even if it's in China. These are famous statements that are attributed to the Prophet. And so we want to seek knowledge. We want real knowledge. Then what could be the second pitfall? If let's say I'm now aware of my own ignorance, and I'm aware of the fact that any belief that I hold, or any action that I take, it's going to be rooted in knowledge. It's going to be firmly rooted in knowledge, not on supposition. What is the second? What is the second pitfall? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The second pitfall is our physical tendencies and desires. Do you know why taqwa is so important? It's because when you fear Allah Azza wa Jal as He should be feared, then, and you restrain yourself, if you're able to restrain your desires, if you're able to restrain your anger, then you've cleared up, right? You sort of cleared up the field. You've cleaned up the field. You're ready to play. Imagine playing, a soccer game or a basketball game on a dirty field or a dirty basketball court. There's a bunch of objects on the court. You first want to clear the court. And so when we approach the truth, when we approach Allah Azza wa Jal, am I approaching Him with a pure heart? Am I approaching Him where my intellect is in command and my intellect is directing my anger and my desires? Or do my desires have free reign? Imagine you're debating a Sunni, imagine you're debating a Zionist, but you haven't controlled your anger. You haven't let go of your own self-admiration. Sometimes you're just going to be looking for the right argument, not for the sake of truth, but simply because you want to defeat your opponent, because you want to say that other person is wrong, I'm right, that person is wrong. And so you find some people, where does that fanaticism come from? Where does that extremism come from? When someone is so extreme to the point where he doesn't care about the truth, all he cares about is his own truth. And so when someone has taqwa and he wears the garment of taqwa, he dons the robes of taqwa, and he has that fear of Allah Azza wa Jal. Even if I'm approached by my greatest opponent, I'm always going to fear what? Allah Azza wa Jal. Maybe he has a point. Maybe that opposing belief is true. Not because of any benefit of doubt that I'm giving to my opponent, but because I'm wary of Allah Azza wa Jal. Who's lost that sleep? Sometimes when I'm even approached by an atheist, it's like, I'm going to take what he says, and I really want to think about it. Because I want the truth. And for us, Allah Azza wa Jal is the truth. But I want it. If a Sunni comes up to us and says, how dare you guys say this about the companions of the Prophet? I have fear. Maybe he's right. You can only have that if you have fear of Allah Azza wa Jal. And other than that, it's just simply my desires. Whatever my desire, whatever I want, whatever my heart desires, I'm going to go down that route. And so we want to make sure that not only are we, when we approach the truth and we seek knowledge, not only do we want to make sure that we rely on true knowledge and avoid supposition and avoid fallacies, but we also want to make sure that we tame our desires. And that's why when you find jadal in the Quran, what type of jadal, what type of dispute or debate should I engage in? Do I go in front of schoolboys and schoolgirls and start debating and put it on TikTok? And then I want more views, and I'm interested in, right, making a name for myself, and I'm interested in entertaining other people? Or do I have that fear of Allah Azza wa Jal? How many people do we see on TikTok and Twitter? They don't have that fear. They have that arrogance. But when you have fear of Allah Azza wa Jal, you're never arrogant. Even if someone who's sitting across the table to me has a completely diametrically opposed opinion to me, I fear Allah Azza wa Jal. In the same way that if I'm fighting the enemies of Allah Azza wa Jal, and this is something that we spoke about, if I'm fighting the enemies of Allah Azza wa Jal, I never allow my desires to overtake me. I never allow my anger to overtake me. I'm not fighting them because of my anger. I'm not fighting them because of my desire to kill them or my desire to conquer. I'm fighting them fi sabilillah, for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. So we want to make sure, and taqwa is the best garment to don. The third pitfall of reasoning is haste. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam says, Muslims or people fall into two categories. Sometimes when they fall astray, they fall into two categories. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, it's recorded, says, in two verses of the Quran, God has singled out His servants and warned them. First, that they not affirm a thing until they have attained knowledge of it. So don't be quick to accept something unless you have knowledge in it. And second, that they not deny a thing until they have attained to knowledge of it, until they've reached that stage of knowledge and certainty. Meaning what? What is the Imam trying to say? Sometimes we're hasty. We're quick to deny something, but we have no true knowledge of it. We're quick to affirm something, but we have no true knowledge of it. And so we want to make sure the search for truth is something that requires time. It requires jihad. It requires us striving for the truth. It's not something that's going to come easy. If you ever see or speak to people who have converted to Islam, and you see, mashallah, all the Muslims, when they see that convert, they're like, mashallah, and they're congratulating him and things like that, and they have no idea what that person went through. Some converts spend a year with the Quran. Some converts might say that I have to read the entire Quran before I accept this. That's the spirit of the Quran. Take your time, attain knowledge, and then what naturally comes, as Amir al-Mu'mineen says, that submission. It's almost like kind of the idea that, kids, when they put things they might be experimenting, or they might put their hand in the fire, or they might put something in the outlet. But once they have knowledge of the harm or the danger of putting something in an outlet or putting their hand in fire, they've submitted, they've surrendered to the truth. And so we have to submit and surrender to the truth. But we have to make sure that we're not quick to accept something and we're not quick to deny something. There are a lot of people, when it comes to the Ahlul Bayt, they're quick to deny their virtues and their merits. But they have no knowledge. The fourth pitfall is looking to the past and this blind following. How many of us are blindly following the customs of our families? How many of us, it's not a bad thing, it's a ni'mah. It's a blessing that we were born into Muslim families. It is a blessing that we had religious parents. But how many of us are just simply Muslim because we're following the custom of our fathers and our mothers and our grandfathers and our grandparents? Islam wants to do away with that. It wants to tell you, don't blindly follow tradition and custom. Break away from custom. Sometimes in Laylatul Qadr, the ulama, they have not disagreements but debates. Or they have discussions. I wouldn't say debates, but discussions. What a'mal should we do? Or maybe in Ashura, we might find that there are certain narrations or certain narratives that are presented on the minbar. And sometimes, you know what figures into that discussion? Well, if we do this, then the people are no longer going to attend the majlis or might no longer attend Laylatul Qadr. Because people have become, it's a custom. It's a custom that they become used to. Islam wants us to do away with that. Many people, they stray away from the truth, or they don't attain the truth, or they can't approach the truth because they're struck by blind following. They simply follow custom and tradition. They look to the past. And that takes us to the fifth pitfall, personalities. Personalities. How many of us are attached to a personality? And that personality might blind us to the truth. That personality might do what? might tell us something, and now I strongly believe in this. In fact, I take it as an absolute truth. There's no absolute truth other than the absolute truth of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so we want to avoid personalities. We want to avoid blind following. We don't want to look to customs. The criteria for truth is not customs. It's not tradition. It's not blind following. It's not personalities. I want to make sure that when I'm ready to approach the truth or reach the truth or seek the truth, that I've tamed my soul. I have great character. Great character is a prerequisite to what? For the truth. One time someone reached out and he wanted to debate me. And I told him, he was very harsh in the way, accusations coming left and right and so on and so forth. And you could see this person wasn't someone who's willing to engage in that dialogue. When you think of dialogue, someone brings something, a statement, someone else brings another statement, and then you come to a synthesis. You come to there's that sort of common ground. And you keep doing that until you reach the truth. But with someone who has prior contentions, he comes to the table not for the truth, but to simply debate. And I told him, I'm not going to debate you. He said, you're scared. I said, okay, I'm scared. Having great character is a prerequisite for the truth. Having taqwa is a prerequisite to arriving at real knowledge. And we want to make sure that we base it on real knowledge. And that's why our ulama, they study logic. And that's why they study the theory of knowledge. And that's why they go through years, painstaking years, in order to arrive at the truth. What do we have then? You might say, what can I hold on to? The very first thing that you can hold on to is your fitrah. The second thing you can hold on to is your intellect, that which is self-evident. I have one absolute truth. La ilaha illallah. Allahu huwa al-khaliq. Ihsan, I believe his name is Ihsan, recited beautifully the last verses of Surah Al-Hashr. And you see that taqwa is there. The very first sentence or the very first command that I think he read, taqullah. But then it goes through the knowledge of Allah Azza wa Jal. That is my absolute truth. Another absolute truth is the Quran. That's why if we find, there's people that are saying things that are awkward or weird on the minbar, I hold on to the Quran. I hold on to my intellect and what is self-evident. I hold on to those absolute truths. And then, you can look at history, you can look at past experiences, you can look at nature. But ultimately, what I want to share with you guys, and this is the month of Ramadan, we have the Quran. We have the Quran. And the beautiful thing about the Quran, you might say, well, look, whoa. That's circular reasoning, because you just said don't fall back on tradition and don't fall back on blind following and don't fall back on this and that, and you're telling us to hold on to the Quran as an absolute truth. You know the beauty of the Quran is the confidence of the Quran. The beauty of the Quran is telling us to question, is telling us to reflect, is telling us to understand. The beauty of the Ahlul Bayt is they told us to reflect. أول الدين معرفة الله, the very first sentence of Nahj al-Balagh. The very first riwayah in Kitab al-Kafi is طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم ومسلمة. And so in this month, after we've struggled with not eating and drinking, and our sleep has been disrupted, and we stood in prayer, and we have attained that quality of taqwa as Allah Azza wa Jalla intended for us to attain. Now I'm looking for increasing my certainty, increasing my submission, but I have to be wary. I have to be wary of these pitfalls, and I have to make sure that I only seek what is firmly rooted in knowledge. I want to say a few things, and then we'll end tonight's lecture and the series. moving forward, when I look at this community, there should be no taboos. When I still find, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble. Let me say something about Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Fadlallah, rahmatullah alayh. The Sayyid, whenever I get the chance, when I'm in the suburbs of Beirut, I try to go to the Masjid al-Hassanain and read the Fath for Sayyid Muhammad Hussain. His Quran, he wrote a very useful Quran, tafsir of the Quran, in about 22 volumes, I think 23 volumes. It's a beautiful tafsir. What he did in Lebanon is something that is unparalleled. From the orphanages that he built, the schools that he built, the charity that he did, the awareness. If we're talking about truth, when our shabab, when our fathers and grandfathers were drowned in communism, and they were attracted to communism and Marxism and all of these alien ideologies, it was people like Sayyid Muhammad Hussain that was defending the worldview of Tawheed. He was rebuting and refuting all of those ideologies. So he played a very important role in terms of awareness, raising awareness. He was part of that Islamic movement. He was a father to many of the shuhada. And so there's nothing but respect for the Sayyid. But when we look at what is unanimously agreed on by the experts, by the scholars, unanimously agreed on, is that when a marja or a scholar passes away, then I'm going to look to the living scholar. I need to look to a living scholar, because I don't follow a madhab of a scholar. I don't follow the madhab of Sistani. I don't follow the madhab of Istinjani. I don't follow the madhab of Sheikh al-Saduq or Sheikh al-Mufid. I follow the madhab of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Similar to Ahl Sunnah, when you look at Ahl Sunnah, they have these 4 great madahib, schools of law. And for them, that door of ijtihad was closed. And so they follow these madahib. Nahna, we follow the madhab of Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And so when I look at it 15 years after the passing of the Sayyid, and there are people who never followed him in his lifetime, are following him. Fear Allah Azza wa Jal. You could be right. The taqleed, you might find an opinion or a view, you might find clear evidence which might say that you can follow the Sayyid. I'm not denying it. But fear Allah, the way that some people engage in these masail as if there's no consequences. Of course there are consequences. Laylatul Qadr, depending on what marja I follow, Laylatul Qadr might change. خَيْرٌ مِّنْ أَلْفِ شَهْرٍ. This isn't just some conceptual thing. It's not something that is i'tibari. It's not just something that is in the mind. Oh, there's a night, it's worth 1,000 months. It's something that is real. It's something that is in the concrete world. And so me following a marja or not following this marja and not that marja, what ends up happening? My Laylatul Qadr changes. Or Laylatul, right? Or Laylatul Eid, or Yawm al-Eid. We all know that it's haram to fast on the day of Eid. You might say these are small things, Shaykhna, who cares? We'll have 2 Eids and so what? Fine, that's great. There are ways, there are mechanisms for us to come together. There are mechanisms when there are disagreements and valid disagreements among the ulama, then we can accommodate for that. But the only thing I'm sharing here is I'm not pushing you towards something. I'm just saying that these masail, these questions, these issues, these matters deserve our attention. And they can't be done willy-nilly. It takes effort. It takes tears. It takes sleepless nights to figure out what is the truth and what does Allah Azza wa Jal want from me. Because once I've understood that absolute truth, then what am I going to do? I'm going to submit. I'm going to surrender before Allah Azza wa Jal. How do I surrender and submit before Allah Azza wa Jal? I have to follow the halal and the haram. It's a matter of, let's just put it, it's a matter of life and death. Inshallah, Allah Azza wa Jal bless all our ulama. And bless the Sayyid for his efforts. And bless this community and what it's done. And bless these organizers. And allow these last nights, these last few moments, these last few hours of Ramadan to continue in blessing, to be constant in blessing. And here's my call of action to the community. There's a lot of things happening in the community. There's a lot of good work that's happening in the community. When I was in Qom, one of the beautiful things about Qom was that you saw that it was something, whenever there was a Eid, man, it was a Eid. I remember during the Eid, you start going to the Haram of Sayyid al-Masuma, Lady Fatima, and the precinct, and then everyone is praying underneath the sky. Everyone is praying, and you hear the takbir, Allahu Akbar. And you find sort of this magnificent feeling. Yawm al-Ashir on Karbala, when the 10th of Muharram, it is still, this entire city is still. Everyone is sad. It's completely different. We have to aim for that. We can't just be, I remember when I was growing up in this masjid and learning in this masjid, we kept on hearing this idea of 40-day Muslims. We can't be 40-day Muslims. There's so many organizations, there's so many efforts going on, brothers and sisters, in this community, whether it's the Boy Scouts, and now alhamdulillah we have a number of Boy Scouts in the community, whether it's centers like this or other centers in the community, whether it's youth programs, whether it's at the university. Take part in these efforts. Give your hand in these efforts. Seek out people and say, I want to join. And inshallah, we get to that point where we become a community of taqwa. Imagine you're coming through Ramadan, you're driving through the month of Ramadan through Dearborn, and it's not like any other city, because it's the month of Ramadan. There's almost like this kind of sort of blanket of taqwa that has sort of covered it. Inshallah, that is our aim, because our eyes are on Sahib al-Zaman. The one thing that our shuhada gave us, the one thing after all of these years of struggle, the one thing they taught me was that Islam wasn't something to be placed in the past. Living like Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam can happen every single day. And our jihad is different, and our responsibilities are different, and we're going to be wise, and we're going to be law-abiding, and we're not going to do anything that's fanatic or extreme. But we need to build this community. We need to strengthen it. We need to stand on the shoulders of ulama like Sheikh Muhammad Jawad Shirri, who established this center, and keep going until we reach that final day when Allah Azza wa Jall's promise, we see Allah Azza wa Jall's promise, inshaAllah. Allahumma taqabbal minna ya Allah. Alhamdulillah alladhi qada anni yawman min shahri Ramadan. والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته